Thank you. First of all, I must thank WDC and ADRI for calling me here. While I claim to be no authority on cooperatives or agriculture, I have a little bit of experience in this field, and this is what I'm going to share with you. And to start, I'll begin with an anecdote. When I was asked to speak here, the only thing that kept coming into my mind was, हर स्वाद में क्या लिज्जत, everybody would know that. बचपन से टीवी में, दूरदर्शन में जो एक गाना हमारे कान में हमेशा चलता था, लिज्जत पापड़ का, लिज्जत पापड़, you know. And somehow that time it was just a cartoon and a soft toy that would speak, and that was attracting for me as a child. But today, when I sit and talk about agriculture and cooperatives and women, I think that has become an epitome of what a cooperative can do for women. It was started in 1959 with 7 women and 80 rupees. And today it has a turnover of 500 to 650 crore rupees. And it has an international market running over 29 crores. So this is the boundless opportunity that cooperatives offer for women. Closer home, we have, I'll mention of 2 women cooperatives which has done exceedingly well. One is Vaishali Swayam Siddha Mahila Swavalambi Sarkari Samiti. It is one cooperative society that has brought in women's issues to the forefront. It has, so that is one, that is health, sanitation, empowerment, and economic activity. As many of you would know, this is the group which hit upon the idea of low-cost sanitary napkins. Something that was very, very basic, and something that was not really done and popularized to the scale which they did. So once they hit upon this idea, it is the potential of cooperative society, potential of women coming together and creating a voice regarding an issue which was usually swept under the carpet. Talking about menstruation cycle, talking about sanitary pads, preparing them, low cost, and in turn, making women more vocal and also giving them an economic benefit. What better opportunity than it could be? The second I would talk about, again, it's a Sambhavna Mahila Vikas Sahkari Samiti. This is a very, very interesting one. It started with making banana chips and sattu, which we see mostly associated with cooperatives. But they decided to move on. And when they decided to move on, what they did was they hit upon the idea of fashion. They realized that it's not, fashion is inherent to every woman. And they want to be, you know, it's not about urban, local divide. It's not about caste. Every person, every woman has a sense of fashion. And then they decided to start in trendy clothes. It was an idea that was waiting to happen. So trendy clothes in small towns and cities. And now they have orders in embroidery, stitching, dyeing, everything. So they have brought a sense of fashion, an idea which was inherent to women and every woman. I mean, you go to rural areas, the way women put, you know, they're so nicely fashionable. So, and this is what they drew. They drew their inspiration from there, and they're doing exceedingly well. So this is the opportunities part I'm talking about. But before we start patting ourselves too much on back, I would like to tell you that such success stories are there, but we need more of them. So against this background of, yes, there are success stories, there are ways to bring women together, but I think we have miles to go before we actually rest. I open the discussion for my co-panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for those excellent sharing of facts and raising a hope on the issue. The specific question that this panel is supposed to discuss is this, that women do participate in economic activities, but this participation is not across all the sectors. There is one sector where this participation is particularly concentrated, and it is the sector of agriculture. I'll give you some statistics, but what I wanted to say that if we need empowered women, we need to empower them in very many ways, but I think one of the most important way is economic empowerment. To some extent, they deserve it because they are already working in agriculture. But somehow, the consequent effect of empowerment does not take place. Men also work, women also work. Men are empowered, but women are not empowered. This is the basic issue that when you are discussing empowerment of women, we have to address specifically. Kumar has given me in specific words what the question you are supposed to ask. The majority of economically active women in India work in agriculture. That's India as well as Bihar. As per the World Bank report 2018, women typically work 12 to 13 hours per week more than men. Yet women's contributions are often invisible and unpaid, which further emphasizes the cost of gender gap in agricultural productivity. 12 to 13 works per week means about 2 hours per day. If men work 8 hours, women work 10 hours. That's the statistics, you know. All that you have to discuss here, could you please clarify, madam? Further, the issue faced by women farmers in the country, how these problems could be solved. May I have observations? The cause is there, effect is not there.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me here. And I was just being in the audience for the previous panel, and there's been very insightful discussion on all the issues. I just want to highlight here, being from the cooperative sector and also the dairy sector, in which there has been a successful movement with regard to a cooperative working. It is one of the few sectors in cooperative across India where successful economic, social upgradation has been found for people involved in this poorer members. It may be it male or female. When we talk about female, you have very rightly pointed out that most of our workforce, especially looking after the livestock, is women, the whole family for that matter. Even the kids are involved in taking care of the cattle, feeding them, taking them for grazing. Women mainly so. They use it as a platform not just to care for the cattle, but also for bringing the nutritional gains to their family. Also for the purpose of fuel, the dung provides. And somewhere down the line, they feel involved in the whole activity, but cooperative dairying has given them an avenue in which they can actually feel the power, because it gives them a say, a power to influence. It no doubt gives economic independence to them, but at the same time, they also have an experience of democratic working of an organization which the cooperative sector actually provides. I have seen the working of COMFED for the past 3 years and more, and there are stalwarts before me, Harjot ma'am, Vijay Lakshmi ma'am, and so many more who have actually, they can also vouch for what the model of dairy cooperative and COMFED has actually sustained and provided for the state of Bihar. And inception from 1983 under Operation Flood, when we barely had 20,000 liters of milk, and it was a force which helped us, propelled us, that we were able to get 20 lakh of liters of milk in 2020, 20 to 22 lakh when lockdown came through, when all the HoReCa segment, hotel industry, restaurants were actually closed and shut. The cooperative movement sustained. We provided almost 60 crores of rupees for the farmer poorer prices, milk prices, and we were inducting it into per every 10 days into the rural economy of Bihar. That is a major intervention when you're talking about economic independence and empowerment. This is what will actually sustain them. This will also attract them to entrepreneurship, to actually involve them in more sustainable models of livestock keeping. And of course, given in recent times, we have multiplied our processing efforts. We have to work on our processing, on our marketing efforts. But all said and done, it ultimately the ownership and the control vests with the cooperative, the farmers, the members, the representatives of the board. And out here, I would like to point out that one of the foremost bylaws provisions which were given in COMFED were that management committee of each DCS, Dairy Cooperative Society, would actually have 50% representation of women. Even at that point of time, when reservations are coming through now, even at that point of time, we had 50% representation of women in our management committee. Right now, we have completely female, women dairy cooperative, which are almost 3,500 in numbers, and 2.5 lakh females are associated in day-to-day working of our milk collection and processing. But over a period of time, we are hopeful, given the government interventions and the subsidies and schemes which are being floated, and now that we are working all the more after Bihar government has also taken the initiative of making animal husbandry a very special dairy sector initiative has been given under the Sat Nishchay 2 part. So this will also increase. We have been given under Krishi Roadmap special targets to make only women DCS, and we are in partnership with Jivika and with other organizations to increase this effort. So my point here is that with passage of time, it's a slow exercise, but it takes time. It must be true that initially when a society is made, it works for a few months, it stops. It is also a possibility that initial period there would be a pseudo setup in which males have indirect control over it. But we have seen, because we have societies right from 1985 and 87, and they are doing extremely well. And they have 100% control of their assets and resources. They are doing very good bonus, and they distribute it each year among its members. And it is a big attractive gain for all the other societies in the nearby areas to follow their model as a Adarsh Samiti. So I think over a period of time, with capacity building and awareness, this will come in gradually. Thank you.
So well, I'll start answering this or discussing this with the saying that agriculture is the profession of hope. And when it comes to women, this get more and more reinforced. So the problems all of us know, right? So I would compartmentalize the problems into 4 segments. And that's not only about Bihar or India specific, it's across the globe. So the first important is identity. Women are not farmer. And that's the problem as you put the data as well, right? The second I would say is about the knowledge bank. So what does knowledge bank means about women farmer is the capacity building and the training programs which is implemented by various agriculture sector components. Does it directly reaches to the women farmers? So that's point 2. The third from my lens would be, and that's researchable as well, is the leadership. And leadership is not about, accumulating people and giving lectures. Leadership is also about that self-esteem and self-confidence of a woman, which she, as a farmer, which she gets from her ecosystem. And last but not least, economic empowerment. That when we talk about women farmers, is she actually economically empowered? And these are the problems. And I'm not very, very hopeless for this agriculture in women, because as the co-panelist was sharing, we have taken a step ahead. If you see the data of Bihar, I would say Jivika. I cannot stop whenever I talk at South Asia level also. Jivika is one of the social capital which we have in the Bihar. And you know, this is such a powerful social capital, which is actually, I would say, acting as a catalyst in the agriculture sector, redefining role of women. So from being invisible, you can see that slowly and steadily women farmers are becoming visible. And that the credit goes to Jivika and all the activities taken in the state of Bihar by agriculture universities and also by different agriculture sector organizations working. So that's the solution. How do you actually use the social capital existing in our state of Bihar to reinforce this invisibility into visible aspect of our women farmers? So that's the solution. And the second solution I would talk about is convergence. The convergence is the key if we really want to have the solution what women farmers are facing. So if we see the Women Development Corporation, the Bihar Agriculture University, Department of Agriculture, ComFed and cooperatives, if there is a convergence approach, because all of us are serving the same women who deserve to be referred as farmer. So that convergence approach in policies, implementation and sustainability is the solution from my lens. Thank you.
Thank you, both the panelists. I might add to this that the problem of invisibility occurs in agricultural sector, or for that matter in the rural sector, is that as the society advances, society opts for specialization. Someone is a teacher, someone is a doctor, someone is an administrator, someone is a shopkeeper, so on and so forth. But at the lower levels of the society, this business of specialization is not there. The fellow who works in the agriculture also works in the animal husbandry, also works for the petty transport sector. Same thing for women. She does household work, she does animal husbandry, she also helps husband. So specialization is not there. Once the specialization is not there, it is difficult to get information of what is being done, because everyone is doing everything, or nearly everyone is doing nearly everything. So this is a problem that occurs in a rural society, or what you call a technologically backward society. One of the problems by which we can address this issue is to have a data collection framework. The NSS does it, or some other people do it. Data collection framework which is not for the advanced society. You take this NSS data, employment, you take the agricultural data, you the industrial statistics data, it's for all the advanced society. We don't have much of a data system for a technologically backward society. If we want to do something in the field of women's invisibility, we must have a new data system where this invisibility can be made visible. Okay? That is the point, or the second question. I happen to be a statistician, so I know this problem, why it is invisible. Because the data set that we have, NSS questions that we have, does not make any space for a woman who is basically housewife, but spends at least 2 hours of her time in animal husbandry. उसके लिए कोई जगह ही नहीं है फिर का, समझ नहीं? ये जो problem है, we must address this issue of new set of data for a society where the pattern of work and pattern of life is very different from the so-called urban society, industrial society one. Would you have some comments on that?
You know, when Sugadda and you use the word invisibility, you know, I almost bolted because, you know, my image during monsoon is women doubled up in the fields, and you're in the rice field, and they're working. Man, I can't even think of doing that for 10 minutes, and they work for 8 hours. Yeah. So, I mean, we all have seen that, and yet they are invisible. So what have we done? Have we erased them from our collective consciousness, and we have taken them for granted? Or are we just comfortable with, uncomfortable with the fact that they are double bent for 8 hours doing transplantation, and we just move on? So the word invisible, I think, is a very, very strong word that both of you have used. Because they are, I think it is a mental invisibility that we are talking about here. We are erasing them from our collective consciousness. So yes, I mean, that is what I wanted to add, that yes, they work for 8 hours, and plus then there is household work, there is other stuff that they have to do, and then not to be called farmers, not to be called farmers at all, and they not have that kind of an identity. I think it's a very valid point that you've raised, Sugandha and Ghosh, and maybe you want to add, or you want to move to the next question?
All of us agree on the issue of invisibility of women workforce, especially in agricultural and livestock sector, and it is a visible truth. Invisibly, we recognize it and we all acknowledge it. And it is unfortunate that it is still existing in such big numbers. But I would, moving ahead, and what Mr. Ghosh had said about getting the right kind of data and getting the right kind of sanctity to the data, that exactly what has been their proportionate share in the whole sector and what has been the economic benefits that they have reaped out of it, that is actually very pertinent. And as we all know that we are talking about, since the last 2 years, the mission given to us in dairy was doubling of farmers' income by 2022. And Honorable Prime Minister and government departments have really moved with a lot of set of details how to go about it. I think this would be relevant here. A woman who's involved in dairy, livestock, she's also doing crop work, she's also attending to the fodder, cutting the green silage, making it, giving it to the livestock. She's also at the same time involved in poultry, feeding the chicks, doing the needful. At the same time, the composting, vermicomposting element, the biogas which is functioning, providing her the gas for fuel for her kitchen. Now all these have to be a convergence and they have to be put together, and given the benefits that she reaps out of it, somewhere down the line it will also indicate to the economic empowerment that she will actually give to her household and herself. Now the approach is how we actually, as you all rightly said, how all our departments work together, be it energy department, be it agriculture, livestock, cooperative, animal husbandry, women development. All of us have to now make it happen that she gets all the right tools in her hands to improve, and she can actually gauge the potential and the benefits she reaps out of it. So there is an immense potential for us to work on, and the invisibility factor through passage of time and basic training and capacity building would actually come through the social change that we are working on. I think that's it.
You want to say something?
Small point, but a very powerful point, I would say, with my experience of last 1 decade. The data collection is a very huge problem, as you put it, Dr. Ghosh. Do we actually want only sex disaggregated data and then we say that it's a gender research? So just counting the numbers of women farmers in certain specific bias criteria, as you very well put up, both the panelists, that, you know, a woman is doing extra farming work, but there is no segment or there is no data collection mechanism which actually focuses and caters to her need. So that's important. And other thing is also very crucial for us to understand. What kind of interventions we are doing with women farmers? Is that need analysis done beforehand with them? Rather than I have to promote certain technology in rice, I will go with certain technology and work with self-help group that adopt it. Or it is a data-driven technology adoption by women farmers. So that's also one of the aspects I would like to put forward. Yeah, thank you.
No, because Shikha is in Comfed, and so I wanted to say that, you know what Ila Bhatt said. She said when a woman milks a cow in her village, she is not counted as a worker. But when she's in a dairy cooperative, she gets an identity and visibility. So that is what cooperative does, you know. They turn their everyday work into an identity and empowerment. Maybe you want to go to the second question.
Yeah. This is, of course, very true. When the effect of your work reaches the market, it becomes visible. If it does not reach the market, then it is not visible, which from the point of economics is absolutely irrational. That if work to be valued has to reach the market. If it doesn't reach the market, let me tell you that this concept of women's invisibility of women's work has not been completely ignored by economists. I know of people who have conducted studies which are called time disposal studies. Okay? You don't ask what do you do? Are you a teacher? Are you a farmer? Or are you a trader? No. You ask, what did you do forenoon? Subah kaam kya kiya tha? Normally, best thing is to ask how many hours you have spent in looking after the animal husbandry, how many hours you have spent in cooking, how many hours you have spent. But ये घंटे के हिसाब कोई रूरल वीमेन दे नहीं पाएगी, संभव नहीं है. तो हाफ डे के हिसाब से हम लोग पूछते हैं, आपने सुबह क्या किया था और शाम को क्या किया था. This such type of time disposal studies has been done by many people, and it has been shown that they also work. We also have to distinguish between economic work and gainful work. Okay? Economic work is counted by NSS or any other employment statistics, but they don't take into account what is meant by gainful work. There are many work which is gainful but not economic, excluding the so-called mother-father's role. If you are looking after a baby, that's also gainful work. But I'm prepared to exclude that. You know, that's a different thing altogether. But within that also, you do many kind of work which is purely sufficiently gainful but not economic. Looking after the work. I think when Kumar makes a recommendation, a summary of this today's proceeding, this should go that the state government and all the data collecting agencies throughout the country should make special design for measuring or knowing the women's activities. Special design, which is not for men. That's a different kind of one, okay? Take into account visibility, invisibility, market, non-market. Within the family work, if you are looking after, you know, much of the post-harvest work is done by women. At least it used to be so in earlier days. Not in the field, but the post-harvest work is done by women. You have long, angna hota hai, isme hota hai. So there has to be a special effort to collect data on women's activities, what is the gainful but not market. That is a very strong suggestion that I want to make. Another one which you have already discussed before is that I mentioned that once the gainful activity reaches the market, it becomes economic activity. But even when it is economic, in a small family, my driver works here, his wife and one daughter lives at home. His wife maintains 2 milch cows, sufficient amount of work. Maintaining 2 milk cows is not a difficult, ordinary thing, okay? But that is not counted. What I wanted to say is that small amount of work which brings you 10 rupees, 20 rupees per day is not counted. But as cooperative movement provides an opportunity where these small amounts of work is collectivized, then it becomes economic work, it becomes visible, it becomes valued, and it is also, you know, shared as a success story. So this story has to go further. As MS Priyashi was saying in the beginning, we have done a lot, but we have miles to go. There are certain countries, certain parts in India where cooperative movement has been extremely strong. As far as I know, Maharashtra is one of them, okay? And in fact, Maharashtra's cooperative movement is so strong that it has strong political implications. It has political implications. Sharad Pawar is an outcome of that cooperative movement. in Bihar, necessity for such cooperative movement, not only for animal husbandry, for many other activities is substantial. And state government should make some efforts to do that. I was wondering, Ms. Beshi, we have done success in many other fields, but what are the exact cause of that? What made us reach that success? I can also tell you that I am here in Bihar from 60s onwards. In 60s also there were cooperative movements, but many of them died out flatly. But the recent ones has succeeded.
I think what you called about the social capital that Jivika has created. So when you talk about a Sharad Pawar from Maharashtra, I think very soon, I mean, in near future, we are going to see a Sharad Pawar from Jivika also very soon, because it has built up so much of social capital. It has given so much of leadership roles to women, and it is there in every field. Whether it is MDMs now, whether it is health, whether it is during COVID, making of masks, everywhere Jivika's intervention is there. So, yes, our cooperative movement are doing well. And you know, one of the reasons for its success is what I feel is the values that are now being inculcated into groups. It is not the value of saying कि सरकार की योजना से आपको लाभ मिलेगा. You know, ठीक है कि आपको विधवा पेंशन मिल जाएगा या आपको वृद्धावस्था पेंशन मिल जाएगा. It is about the values of self-help that is being inculcated. It is the value of democratic decision making that is being inculcated. It is the value of equity and equality that is being inculcated. And a feeling of solidarity that is being, that all women are having amongst themselves. I think more than government interventions, more than outside intervention, it is the solidarity amongst women that they recognize that they have to come together for economic activity. And the government and government policies has been like a catalyst. That yes, if there is already a fertile field where government is acting as a catalyst with right decisions and right policies, and I think that is why it is becoming better. But I still feel that we have to do, we have to do in terms of linkages with the banks. There, the microfinance is one issue that I would like to raise here, because I feel that any cooperative movement or any sector where microfinance still remains an issue. And cooperative can be a solution to that. But maybe I would like to hear more from you about the microfinancing in agriculture and the cooperative sector and how we can further improve it.
I think cooperative already has a very strong financial roots. There's a network of cooperative banks, PACs, also schemes which support a lot of efforts which are being pumped in through the cooperative network, which is specially designed to cater to the organization and the members who have come together for an economic gain, as well as who are willing to run the organization in a democratic and a fair sense to distribute the profits as well as to take the risks from it. In ComFed, we get a lot of proposals from the cooperative financial agencies which come forth to provide small loans. And they know the standing and the economic viability of repayment of those loans, and they are willing to, based on the audit and the balance sheet of the society. But at the same time, I would like to highlight here, because right now, we just had last week SLBC also, the credit share which is actually going through KCC or through banking institutions to the farmer as such, not to the society, to the farmer, is extremely negligible and abysmal. It is absolutely very poor. Maybe for agriculture, they seek some kind of a collateral, the LPC and other institutions, though the government has already said that animal husbandry does not need a collateral security. They have cattle, and ComFed and its unions have already certified that this person is our normal, regular pourer who's getting economic returns from the milk that they sell us. Even then, we see the microfinancing to the farmer is extremely poor and very hesitant at the level of bank. I believe this matter has been raised at all forums and a couple of days also earlier, and it is a reality. Nobody wants to take that risk of NPA or maybe that access to digital payments, which also is a big component, whether bank feels more confident that they have a digital payment coming to their account, so we will give them and it will be taken care of. That is a very big element of challenge which we still have to meet. So yes, DCS and unions as an organization, they have a better share for financing, but at the same time, the farmer as such, if we move to them for their working capital, it is not so. Thank you.
Yeah. So specifically when I'll take this question, the women farmers, see the biggest issue which I find is the land rights part. When you go to the bank to take a loan, if I'm a woman farmer, the bank needs collateral and that's the land. So see, the reality is, in Bihar, we have 7% land rights for women. Nationally, we have 12.7 across 13%. But the women does 70 to 80% of farming work, whether it is for the production side or the post-harvest side as well, when we see to the women farmer. Now the question rises, what are the interventions which we need to do at this point of time? Do we really wait for a time when the land reform, because that's a political issue, let's accept it. Land reform is a straight political issue. None of the government, as for my understanding goes, will get directly into it. You need to have strong social reformer as a politician to get into this land right movements. But there is a rise, there's a rise in the voice about the land rights for women farmers. So that is one of the key issues which I find in the microfinance. Now I would talk about the positive side of it. Again, I will take example of Jivika. See, since we in International Rice Research Institute in South Asia project, we closely work with in Eastern India, and Jivika is one of our very important partner. You know, during the COVID period, it happened during the Kharif time, the peak of the COVID. The women farmers did not stop doing their rice activities. So nursery raising, whether it was manual nursery raising or it was mechanized nursery raising. You know, the scientists were on the field, my scientist and team. What we found, when they needed small microfinance, they took it from their own self-help group. You know, this is a model, and I would request the organizers to put it and highlight it to the national and international forum, that see, this is what a woman sitting in Bandara block, I'll take the name of the farmers like Bholi Sakhi and Guddi Sakhi, they need it. I have an environment of this self-help group where I feel so confident कि दीदी हमको 10,000 चाहिए लोन, हम चुका देंगे इसके बाद, हमको धान की रोपनी करनी है, and the group comes together to give it. So that's a new innovations, I would say, and also the positive side of this challenge. So we have to strengthen on that. And of course, to the bank, I would say that bank needs to be gender sensitive. When it's come for women farmers, women in agriculture, you have to take an extra mile, extra step in taking, taking them ahead together. So that's my point. Yeah, thank you.
Friends, we could have extended discussion for a much longer time. There are many other issues, which is women in agriculture. That's not possible. But one point I must, at the last point, that I bring to your notice, as well as the notice of the governors. Point is this, as Kumar has given to me. 73.2% of the rural women workers are farmers, but own only 12.8% of the landholdings in India. Okay? When a female farmer isn't empowered to make decisions about the land on which she works, okay, she doesn't own it. It is owned by her husband or probably her father-in-law, but she is working on it. If I am working on a piece of land on which I don't have any ownership rights, okay, then how do you expect me to function as efficiently as it should? That is a major challenge that we face, okay? I know part of the answer is that in a patriarchal society, this gender disparity is so pervasive that it also reaches the so-called property loss. But that doesn't answer the question fully. In non-land assets, I'm sure the women's right will be slightly more, not much more, slightly more. So this ownership of the land is a very important issue which makes the participation of women in agriculture a very difficult one. I must also add that I had done a survey some time back with respect to migrant workers. I came across that nearly 10% of the households in rural Bihar are women-headed, either because the husband is a migrant or because the husband is a premature death and even the father-in-law has a premature death and the lady alone is bringing up the whole family with minor children. Sometimes with brother-in-law, devar bhi hai, kam umar ke devar bhi hai. Ye bhi. 10% of the households in rural Bihar are women-headed, and they are not women in a nominal sense of the term. She has to take the decision, But the property is not in her name. Property is not in her name. That makes a big difference to the maintenance of agricultural efficiency and the role of women in agriculture. Where is that? It is possible for her to enter in the market economy that could provide higher earnings and reliable sources of income. Since women lack of access to land and controllable land is a crucial element of their subordination to developing countries, could you please clarify, would it be possible for all women from family cooperatives to mitigate the challenge? I'm sure cooperative is the answer for that. But as long as that hasn't happened throughout Bihar, this challenge is a major one for women's role in agriculture. Some comments on that. We have 5 to 10 minutes.
I believe cooperative as a movement has already ingrained itself in Bihar. It is good to see it's not just in dairy, it is also in other fields. And perhaps the new form of cooperative, which we call the new generation cooperative, there are the companies, they are registered under the companies perhaps, they are equally efficient in their own way. They have a set, like what you're talking, Jivika has also come up with the dairy network, but under a Companies Act. Similarly, other players nationally are also networking. So FPOs, farmer producer companies, are also self-help groups. All these activities, they have to do their work in tandem. They have to come together because all these various manifestations have been created to address some existing situation or problem in hand. And somewhere all of them have a basic existence and they address to the requirement that the society or the agriculture and the economy needs. And like if we say being a cooperative dairy, we are only pooling in only around 12% of the milk. The other 98% it's still in the unorganized sector. But the unorganized sector is also full of such entrepreneurs who are not just consuming in the household, they are also selling it for other needs. So I believe this kind of model is there everywhere. Given the economic situation and the social conditions in which best capacity can be built and outcomes can be gained, the people, they align themselves and they propel themselves to work out accordingly. So cooperative is rather a very large set, and there are significant small sets. Over a period of time, all this is actually working. Even in Bihar, we've seen several such success stories have already been seen, and I believe more are in the making in the times to come. So we are looking forward to the future, I think.
So, to answer this with my understanding, agriculture is a profession of hope. And I'm really, really hopeful that not undermining this issue of land rights and the decision making, that is a problem. But again, I would say that what are the innovations and time-bound activities which can be done at the current situations taking all the interventions, technology to the women farmer, where they come together in constraint, and constraint is an opportunity as well. They come together and they do it, and in Bihar you have examples set, even in India, that coming together in the form of cooperatives or self-help groups, women have the bargaining and negotiation power. And with those bargaining and negotiation power, because of the group effort, this problem can be at least tackled, if not finally resolved. So that's, yeah, my understanding goes. Thank you.
Just two words I'll take up from, I'm glad you raised the issue of migrants, because we've seen hordes of migrants coming back during COVID. And that's true that every household has somebody working out. And then what it does to the land rights and what it does to presence of women in agriculture is one area that needs to be explored more. And your word I'll pick up is the bargaining power which you talk about. Once the women are coming together and there is an economic activity, it leads to a lot of cascading effects, There is empowerment, she finds a voice, there's the improvement in quality of life. So yes, cooperatives does offer women a space where her regular labor is recognized as an economic activity. And that is what cooperative does. But before we move on, I just want to say that number of dedicated women cooperatives is just 2% of the total number of cooperatives. So that is only the 2% that we are talking about. And also in the general cooperatives, we have a ratio of 72:38. So that means that in the women role presence in cooperatives are still a work in progress. And what I feel is that, well, beginnings have been made. What you talked about mentoring, it needs to be mentored, it needs to be nurtured, and it needs to be sustained in the long term to see some very, very positive results.
Thank you very much. Soumya?
Thank you all for flagging out different issues related to women in agriculture, and I think this is all the more relevant for an economy like Bihar. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, ma'am, especially for coming. Thank you. We have come to the last part of today's conference. So for this, it's my pleasure to invite Srimati Harjot Kaur Bamra, Managing Director, WDC, to come to the dais and share her concluding remarks. Also request Professor Ghosh to be here at this. Yeah.
I think we bureaucrats like to have the last word, so keeping that tradition alive, I would first request Professor Ghosh to kindly sum up the whole discussions today. We had a very varied and very enriched discussion today, and it was really a pleasure to sit through it and listen to such enlightened speakers. So, what do you think?
Friends, academicians are often accused for doing useless activities, only talking, doing nothing. Today, we repeated that mistake again. In a sense, if you really go through the deliberations of the whole day, you realize that we did discuss some specific problems of women empowerment in a much more theoretical manner, so that if some of us are really serious about it, we can take the theoretical discussions into research and into action. Unfortunately, the system of education, not only India, throughout the world, is that कुछ लोग रिसर्च करते हैं और कुछ लोग काम करते हैं, अलग-अलग डिपार्टमेंट है। रिसर्च वालों के काम नहीं है कि they should also work, And those who are in charge of working, administration, development agencies, they are not much interested in research, with all due respect to all of them. They are not. This division is very dangerous. This division is very dangerous. I tell you, American administration is very progressive because in that country, moving a senior administrator bureaucrat to university and a university professor moving to administration is a common affair. It's a very common affair there. From university to administration and to administration to university. The research and action has to interact with each other. That is the rule of success. That is the rule of success. Those who do not follow the rule, they suffer. We are one of them. Not Bihar, the whole of India. The whole of India. आप किसी academician के कहिए कि you take a senior job in a advisory capacity, many of them will be reluctant. ये सोच करके कि मेरे बात का कोई value वहाँ पर नहीं होगा. There are one or two organizations which is exception. Planning Commission used to be one of them. Probably Niti I also keep that statistician, where the technocrats and the bureaucrats interact with each other to build some good policies. Okay, but rest of India or rest of the administration is follow that one. Only message that I want to give to all of you at the end of this day, मैंने तो गौर से सुन रहा था, throughout the day हम यहाँ बैठा हुआ था. There are many issues that you have discussed today, which is very, very useful for doing good policy work. We should carry that tradition. And secondly, again I was talking to her also that we do not do enough of research. जो research हम लोग करते हैं, वो थोड़ा बहुत academic in the sense that जो easily data available है, उसी को analyze करते हैं. ठीक है, वो भी काम का है, ऐसी बात नहीं है. If you analyze NSS data, if you analyze NFHS data, it is good for us. It's not useless. But we should supplement that official data with primary data. One of the examples I gave you, the time disposal studies that many officers have done. Okay? Same in the case of women also. We must go to the village, we must go to the households and collect enough of information and do enough of analysis so that meaningful conclusions are possible, resulting from which we can get useful policy directions. This is the message that I want to share with you, friends. And with these words, I thank all of you again and hope we can do our exercise, research and policy exercise together in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ghosh. Summing up today's program, the whole seminar was titled Women Empowerment Issues, Evidence and Policy Response. And we've had at least 4 or 5 sessions on various topics, starting from setting the agenda as to where we are, what do we mean by gender equality, and then coming to the issue of women's economic empowerment, what is work, paid, unpaid work, what is hunger, though we couldn't dwell much on that subject, and what exactly is freedom when we talk about women issues. And then, of course, also about the challenges facing women in post-COVID world, gender and health, issues, evidence, and policy response. Though this is a very vast topic and we could just skim a little bit on it, we just passingly talked about a few issues in that sector, which is a very big one. Equally, women, agriculture, and cooperatives. It was a very lively discussions with all the panel members there. And of course, as Professor Ghosh is saying, that there has to be some kind of a praxis as we learn. Practice and implementation should come together. And he was talking about how that system works in the USA. Well, it works in India also. And I think in India, all of us like to keep our turfs erect. So if professors or people who are at the research do not want to come into the policy level as advisors, Similarly, bureaucrats are not encouraged to become professors in the academy. Though I would say that many of the bureaucrats here are equally PhDs in various subjects. Case in the point being Dr. N. Vijay Lakshmi, who is a PhD and is again, I believe, enrolled for PhD. Yeah. So just to put the clock back, or just to clear the air, even I'm going for my PhD now from Banaras Hindu University. So bureaucrats do move towards research. It's not the other way, but we would definitely like to have some research fellows also move into our field. It won't be bad. By God, it's monotonous at times. But the fact remains on a moving away from the jest point of view. What he's saying is very true. We need to have more better research to make better policies, as they say. Many times when we make some policies, we think it will impact the society in a particular way. But when they are implemented, we find that they are impacting in a different way. We had thought about X and it's having an impact on Y. But then, as they say, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So we in the bureaucracy, we certainly feel that it's much better to keep practicing, keep making policies and trying to implement change rather than just sitting on our seats and thinking it'll come on its own, whatever pace it takes, or maybe we should give some impetus here and there. So it's a constant thing. And as I said, the policy also has to be practical. When I did a course in Duke about international economic development, it was a public policy course in which they came out with, whenever we come up with any paper, they have three options. First is the ideal or the optimistic option. What should be? What should be the best answer to the problem? What should be the best way of going forward? The second is the moderate thing. Okay, the first one is not implementable, no takers for that policy action. Then what do? You go back home, or you still try to go along with policy. So what we were taught was that, no, it's not right to go back home. Change your policy a little bit. It's called a question of bargaining with the political bosses, and you find that, okay, we can drop these two, we can add these two, but make the policy a little more implementable, or more, at least the political bosses buy it. That's what it's called as policy analysis. So sometimes you find that the moderate policy is something which you bring to the negotiating table, and most of the stakeholders on the table would agree to it with a little bit of degree. So policies can never always be utopian. Research can be. That is the difference between implementation and research, and it will always remain. Policies have to be geared to the needs of the people and especially to the electorate. If you live in the utopian world, you're not coming back in the next election. That is a very harsh reality which somebody has to face. Though we are not one of us, not any one of us has to face elections, it is the acid test of political democracy. And whatever we say in closed meetings, I think somewhere we are hitting the nail on the head, because change is happening in India, not only in Bihar, and things are improving. We may question the pace. We may say that things could have improved a little better in this particular sector, or it could have been increased, the speed of change could have been increased. Well, yes, definitely those questions will remain. But I think, as they say, a change is always better than status quo. So in the end, I would just say that all of us who are sitting here today, and many of us who are not here today, sitting in their offices or in their universities, all of us have our heart at the right place and our mind at the right place. And we really believe that together we can all come together and change India, change Bihar, and change women's situation in our country and our state for the better. So the issues are there, the evidence is there, and the policy responses are also coming. But as a bureaucrat, I would definitely like to request all the think tanks, the research organizations, the universities, to come up with even more robust research and data. As Professor Ghosh was saying, policies will not hit the nail on the head if we do not have the relevant data at the right time, at the right place. And data seems to be an issue because data is not being shared. It is being hoarded. As I was saying recently also, that if ADRI could give access to major libraries or research papers to bureaucrats, just like we do it in Duke, you get a password and you have access to the world's best libraries and you can read at your own leisure. Believe me, we bureaucrats do want to read. We like to read despite our busy schedules. And whatever policies today we have in India, I think bureaucrats have contributed greatly to it. Either way, whether you want to make a critique of it or you want to make a praise their efforts or whatever good things have happened over the years in that. We can definitely learn from other states' examples. Some states have done better in some issues, on tackling some issues. Some states have even done a little better in some other issues. So I think there is enough evidence within the country itself, not even to go abroad about it, but to take a leaf from other states and find out exactly what we need to do if we really want to improve the situation here. And to sum up, the crux of the whole situation the whole day long was that things will change if minds will change, if people's way of thinking will change, if we can modify the way people think in some particular situations affecting women, then it will change. And then the whole issue of letting all citizens, whether women or men, making informed decisions in the sense that they have the access to the information that is available for them to make better informed decisions about their own life and their own economic situation. I think that will go a long, long way. And one more topic I can definitely suggest for the next seminar is emerging technology and women's empowerment, how emerging technology can be harnessed for women's empowerment, how we can really think out of box about women's empowerment. Why do we have to go down the same driven road again and again? Maybe their technology is the answer for states like Bihar, who are far behind to take that quantum leap and get their place under the sun along with all the established or the developed states in India. So